It's been really cool. It's really fun that we have this project to do together and that he feels like an advocate, like he has something important to say. He feels like protective of other kids like him. He wants other kids to feel as good about themselves as he feels about himself. And so he kind of like wears this badge, like it's part of my job is to help other parents realize how awesome their kids are. Welcome to the Tilt Parenting Podcast, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber, and today's episode features an interview with me. Since the launch of Tilt and the crazy viral response of the little launch video Asher and I made to announce it, like seriously, the video has been viewed over 25,000 times, which is so cool and kind of crazy. But since that launch day a few weeks ago, I've been getting a lot of emails from people curious to know more about me and Asher, as well as the impetus for creating Tilt. So today, my dear friend Gia Duke, an entrepreneur, change maker, and coach who's been supporting my developing of Tilt since day one, and has also been an incredible support for me as a friend while I've been figuring out my way parenting Asher, is going to interview me as a way to share a bit of my story. My hope is that our conversation will give you more of a sense of where I'm coming from as I interview other guests on the show, and also shed some light onto why I felt so driven to create Tilt in the first place. I hope you enjoy the show, and to learn more about Tilt, the revolution for parents raising atypical kids, visit www.tiltparenting.com. Hello, Gia. Thank you so much for being my interview today.
Oh, I'm so excited. I can't wait.
Let's just dive in then. How should we get started here?
All right. Well, I'm just going to start off with my first question for you. So I know that you've had lots of different kinds of jobs and been involved in many different kinds of projects over the years. So maybe you could start off with telling us a little bit about your background, where you've worked, what you've created before starting Tilt.
Sure. So my background is kind of all over the place, so I will summarize it so I don't bore people listening here. But my background started in video production and working in children's media. So I spent many years in my 20s living in New York, and I was working for some nonprofit organizations and relief organizations like UNICEF. I worked with UNICEF headquarters for 4 years, with CARE, which is a relief and development organization. And then I moved on to working for Nickelodeon, where I worked on the show Blue's Clues. So I was always kind of in I guess I called it the pro-social media space, kind of doing work that felt important to me from a social perspective, but also creative and production oriented. And after Blue's Clues, I took a job with Cartoon Network. I had just gotten married, and my husband and I wanted to try a new city and try LA. And I got this job with Cartoon Network Studios that brought us to LA, and I developed cartoons for them for a couple of years. It was a little bit of a different job and different role for me, but it was super fun to be in that creative atmosphere.
I can imagine.
Yeah, it was fun. It was definitely fun to do the LA thing for a couple of years. And while I was working at Cartoon Network, it was when I really started developing my writing career on the side and doing a lot of volunteer work with teen girls. And so I was kind of a founding staff member for a nonprofit in Los Angeles called Right Girl, and I was super involved with that organization. It paired women writers with teen girls to kind of learn positive life skills and things through writing as a medium. And I really started becoming passionate about supporting teenagers, specifically girls. And so when I left Cartoon Network, and I had already written my first book, which was a book on running for women, was published, which I somehow decided to write at night, burning the midnight oil while I was working a very full-time job. I don't know. I'm one of those people who has to have a lot going on, apparently, at all times.
Yes, you are. We love that about you.
Yeah. So when I left Cartoon Network, I decided to kind of put all my energy into creating books and other content to empower and inspire teen girls into developing into their best selves. And so that's what I did really from the time I left the corporate world in 2003 until, my last book for teen girls came out in 2015. So it was a long run that I was doing work in the girl advocacy space.
Yeah. And what inspired you to create that work? Why did you get so Why were you so passionately involved with helping teen girls?
I think that, I mean, when I get asked that question, my response is usually that I'm still very much a recovering teenager.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like many women, my teen years, specifically my middle school years, were pretty hellish. And I struggled a lot with kind of figuring out who I am. I had super low self-esteem. I had big dreams and things that I wanted to do with my life. And I felt like I didn't have the confidence. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have in my mind what it took to enable me to really fulfill those dreams. And that was really frustrating for me. And so my 20s, you know, I had these really interesting jobs and I got to work with some incredible people and mentors. And it wasn't until kind of my late 20s that I really started to realize, oh, I actually can create what I want here. I am empowered. I don't need anyone to empower me. I can make this happen. But it took a lot of kind of reprogramming of my brain to realize that I was capable. So I think it was when I was in New York, I did some volunteer work with homeless teenagers for a couple years. And then moving on to LA and working with Right Girl, I just really wanted to do what I could to empower and support other teens in making those discoveries at a much younger age than I did, so that they didn't have to kind of wait to reach their dreams.
Yeah, you created something you wish you'd had, it sounds like.
Exactly. I think that's kind of the story of my life. It's a lot of, I don't see what I need, now I guess I have to make it kind of thing.
Yeah, well, you've done an amazing job with that through all your projects that you've done. Thank you so much for giving us a bit about your amazing background. Love Blue's Clues, by the way.
Yeah, so do I. Oh my gosh, that was such a fun show to work on. It's still, some of my dearest friends are from that time in my life. I will always have such great memories of working on that show.
I'll spare everyone and not sing the theme song.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. We'll do it after the interview.
after the interview. Perfect. So when did you then get the first idea? When did the first idea come to create Tilt? What was your initial spark?
Yeah. I'm trying to think when it first happened. I think, I knew from a pretty young age, in terms of Asher's age, that we were dealing with the child who was differently wired. This was not your kind of typical kid, and we weren't going to have a typical parenting experience. And I should just say, I don't really believe there is a typical parenting experience. So just so we're clear about that. But in terms of what I saw, my peers and my good friends and how they were moving through their journey in preschool and all of those kind of rites of passage, our experience looked different. And I'm a researcher. I'm super productive. I'm someone who, likes to problem solve and, okay, this is what's going on. Then I'm going to figure out what I have to do and X, Y, Z, boom, boom, boom. Let's do it. Let's address this. And I found, even with all of those skills, I was really struggling to just figure things out. I felt like there was no roadmap. I didn't know how to move forward. I didn't know where I was supposed to be looking for help. I didn't know how I was supposed to figure out where, my child should be going to school, what my rights were, how I should advocate for him, what kind of support he needed, where to get a diagnosis, where does insurance cover? Like, I didn't know anything. And I found myself in this kind of space of being genuinely confused and frustrated. And, what I was finding online, we all turn to the internet for our answers these days.
Sure.
And I just wasn't finding the information I needed in a way that I could absorb it, in a way that felt good to me, in a way that felt positive and hopeful. I think a lot of what I was finding felt super daunting and overwhelming and not easy to navigate. And nothing was speaking to me. And that was, I don't know, I'm trying to think. It must have been when Asher was maybe 6 or 7. So he's 11 now, so 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I just had this little idea of someday I want to create something that can provide the online experience so that people in my boat, and I know there's a lot of us, that they can feel connected and that they've found kind of where they belong in that world. And something that doesn't have to feel, overwhelming or daunting or icky or any of those things.
Yeah, that's huge. That's
Yeah.
huge. So then when did you realize you wanted to switch directions and shift your focus from creating for teen girls and focus instead on supporting parents raising differently wired kids?
Yeah, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, as someone who was self-employed and most of my work was surrounding my work as a teen girl advocate, and I was writing books. There was a time where I was writing and publishing almost a book a year for teens. I was doing a lot of speaking at conferences. I was writing articles about teen girls and self-esteem and all of those things. And so I had spent so many years immersing myself and really building up my brand, if you will, to use the B word, but building up my place in that world of the girl confidence community, that I didn't want to let that go. I was passionate about it for so many years. And it was hard as Asher got older and school in a traditional school became more challenging, and my time became less my time to work on my stuff and my work on my books and my projects, and more about intervening with teachers at school or driving Asher to this or that therapy appointment. So I started feeling this kind of, it was a sense of frustration initially, hey man, I've got this career thing going on, and now I have all these other things going on. And I felt really conflicted about that and frustrated. And my dear friend Alice Wilder, we met at Blue's Clues, and she's a huge part of my life and of Asher's life. And she used to always say to me, I think that being Asher's mom and what you're going through with him is more a part of your work than you realize. And I'm like, yeah, I know, whatever, But it wasn't until years later, it was the summer of 2013, Alice and I went to this amazing event in Portland. It happens every summer. It's called the World Domination Summit that Chris Guillebeau puts on. And so we went to that event, and it's all about, you're kind of surrounded by these really inspirational change makers and people who are there because they are really fired up about what they want to create in the world and add, kind of their positive imprint on the world. And I went to that event thinking, I knew I had this new book I was writing for teen girls, thinking that event was going to help me kind of frame my thinking for the next phase of my work as a teen girl advocate. And after one day, Alice and I went to dinner, and I just looked at her and I said, I think my work with teen girls is kind of done after this book. I've got bigger fish to fry. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of this surprise even for myself. But I felt this very strong sense that it's time to do something else. I don't have a teen daughter. I have a son who has a lot of things going on and needs a lot of my attention. And I'm so passionate about supporting him and other kids like him. It just was the natural thing. So that was 2013. And that's really where the seed started to grow, to use that euphemism.
Yeah, well, it's a process, right? I remember you going through it, the transition, and juggling it and trying to make that decision. And then, like you said, something just clicked. I remember when it just felt right to you. You're like, this is my next step in my journey.
Yeah, and it was scary. When you spend so long working on one thing, I was like, okay, I've spent all these years. Let's just push that all aside and start from scratch again.
Start something new. Exactly.
Yeah. So, but yeah, you're right. It wasn't something I could say no to. I felt such a strong kind of feeling in my gut that this was supposed to be where my energy was. So I just decided it was time.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you did. Everyone's going to be so glad you did. People that find you. Yeah. But I know it's not easy. That's good. Thank you for sharing that story, because there will be other people that relate to you. So you've written and published lots of books over the last, 13 years or so. I imagine your first instinct was to write a book about what you're experiencing as Asher's mom. Was that what happened?
Yes. The short answer is yes. That is kind of how my brain works after writing books for so many years. I really love the research process of writing a book and kind of doing that really deep dive and becoming an expert in something. So I did decide, I'm going to write this as a book, and I wasn't sure exactly what the book would be. And I did work on a book for, I'm not sure, maybe 10 months or so. It corresponded with me moving to Amsterdam. So right after I I had that kind of aha moment at the World Domination Summit. A month and a half later, our family sold our house in Seattle and moved to Amsterdam. That was kind of our putting our stake in the ground, like, okay, we're trying something new. And I guess we needed to do it in a very big and dramatic way. I don't know, but we ended up here and we're still here and it's been great. But I knew I kind of needed a project that was my own to kind of help me make sense of what we were experiencing as a family. I was newly homeschooling. I was having to redefine my relationship with Asher as both his parent and his teacher, and kind of figuring out what that was going to look like, and also really trying to come to a place of peace with things that were so challenging at that time. You know, when we moved here, Asher had just turned 9, and we had kind of 3 years of really challenging school situations, actually in 3 different schools in Seattle. So there was a lot I needed to process. So I did spend, I would say probably close to a year working on a book to help me kind of process that, everything I had gone through, and make sense of it for myself. Yeah, so I did assume, okay, this is going to start as a book, and that was initially the plan.
So why then did you decide to create a podcast and like a website?
Well, I think I also, though I was working on a book, I always knew that ultimately I wanted to create something much bigger than a book. You know, eventually I knew I wanted to make a podcast. I'm a big consumer podcast. I love that medium. And so I knew that was something I wanted to create, because I think it's a great way to connect and share content. And I also, had this idea of creating this kind of online home that feels comforting and cool and optimistic and hopeful and useful and all of those things. So that was always the plan. And I think I kind of assumed the book would come out and then these other pieces would support the book. And as it turns out, this is supposed to come first. I have a book that have worked on for a while, and my agent has it right now, and we're going to see what happens with that. And in the meantime, I didn't want to sit around and wait. I felt, no, I need to create this now. So I started probably end of last summer, putting my attention full time into developing Tilt into what it is today.
It's fantastic. And your website's amazing. Really a website is a place for people to go, right? So it's like, you really want to build this community. And so you've got to have somewhere to send people. And that's what your website is, correct?
It is. And it's, I think of it as a beta version. I have such big plans. And we'll get to that later, but I'm just saying, yes. So it's a starting place. It definitely is something that for me captures the vibe and hopefully speaks to the people who are my people. I know we are everywhere, and we're kind of like, a lot of us are hiding out. Like, I get a lot of emails from people who connect me with friends, or who say, I'm not really talking about this openly. I don't have other people to talk to. And so there's a lot of people out there who are disconnected and feeling isolated in their experience. And that's kind of my main goal right now, is to kind of bring those people together in a way that feels good and positive to them. So it's not something that they want to hide or feel, is just a reminder that they have these challenges. So so hopefully that's what we're doing through this kind of initial launch of the website and through the podcast.
By the way, I love your podcast. I think they are, if you guys haven't heard the podcast for Tilt, they are so professional and they're so personal at the same time. Because I love to get information the same way through podcasts, but you do a really amazing job of not over editing them. So they're not too quote unquote perfect, right? People don't want perfect. We want real and relatable. And I think you do such a great job through your interviews with other parents and offering insight and tips. And I especially love the ones with Asher.
Thank you.
He's amazing. Oh my gosh, you guys, you've got to check him out. He's got the best sense of humor. I love his honesty, and his personality just like totally shines through the podcast. I think it's so cool that we get to hear mother and child, interacting. You do such a great job. So the podcast is awesome. It's just going to take off. And then you give great, you model really what amazing parenting looks like. And then you offer tips. And then sometimes you have like downloadables, right? Like PDFs and things like that.
Especially with the Asher, which he calls the Asher special interviews. That's not what I call them. I call them the kids POV specials. But anyway, for those, there are downloadables sometimes to support, to give examples like of our screen time planner. We're doing an episode coming up on vacation planning, and we will be sharing the strategy that we use to plan for vacations. There's a lot of paperwork in our house. There's a lot of contracts that are signed, and yes, we're sharing all of that stuff with listeners.
Yeah, it's great. Families will love this. I love it. I've even gained insight from Asher's tips. I love it.
That's awesome.
So, speaking of Asher, obviously he's aware of what you've been working on, both in your book and the creation of Tilt. How have you handled that, like creating something for parents, raising differently wired kids while raising one yourself?
First of all, I've been very transparent with him from the beginning. He's known that I've been working on the book. He knows what the book is about, who it's for. He has known about Tilt. He has helped me develop Tilt. I run things by him. Not only is he my tech advisor, which he is because he helped me with when I got stuck on the website, but he's actually really excited about what we're creating. He's always known about his diagnoses. We told him when we found out, and so it's not something that we ever as a family haven't just been super transparent and open about. And also with the other people in our lives, it's not something we kind of whisper or kind of mention in low voices if Asher's around. This is who our child is. This is what's going on. This is how we're supporting him. This is what he's working on. And it's all good. And so Asher feels really great about himself. He's a super confident person, which you can probably hear from the podcast. Yes. But and he feels excited about this role that he has. And, he helped me with a lot of aspects of developing Tilt. And actually, we've had a couple of the Asher, quote unquote, Asher special episodes air. And I've been getting feedback from a lot of parents who are saying, we listened to this with our 11-year-old child. We listened to this with our 9-year-old son, and the kids are getting a lot out of it too, which I just love. I love that they're co-listening to these episodes. And Asher and I were out for a run tonight, and I mentioned that when we were running. I told him what one of these emails said, and he's like, "Oh, that makes me so happy. I feel like we're making a difference." I'm like, "We are. You are. People are really inspired by your story and by who you are." And so he's really embracing that, and it's been really cool. It's really fun that we have this project to do together, and that he feels like an advocate, like he has something important to say. He feels like protective of other kids like him. He wants other kids to feel as good about themselves as he feels about himself. And so he kind of like wears this badge, like it's part of my job is to help other parents realize how awesome their kids are. He really believes that. Yeah.
Love that. That's amazing. I mean, he's not only comfortable with his story being out there, he's inspired by it being out there, and hopes with the goal of inspiring other kids to just be stoked in who they are.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really awesome. It's been so fun.
That's great. So I know you put a lot of thought into the language and the philosophy that you've used behind Tilt. Can you share with us how you approached that development process?
Sure. I spent many months, again, I mentioned earlier, I'm a research junkie. So I spent a lot of time reflecting on what I wanted the philosophy of Tilt to be and the vibe and the energy behind it. And I actually participated in this program with Jonathan Fields, who is I call him one of my gurus, but just someone that I really respect. He's a writer, and he has a great podcast called The Good Life Project, which if you're into podcasts, definitely check it out. He interviews really inspiring change makers.
Fantastic.
Yeah, he's great. And I participated in a program with him called Revolution U, which was a program that I went through to help me wrap my head around what I was trying to do. And I really committed to that process. And through that, I also did a lot of, research with my people. I talked to a ton of parents who are raising differently wired kids, and talk with them about what their challenges were, what they are needing, what they would change if they could, and really kind of got inside of their heads to make sure that, this couldn't just be my experience. I want it, if this is going to work, it has to, really resonate with a lot of people. So I just spent months doing that kind of work and thinking about the language and doing a lot of gut checks. And I did consult with Asher on the language quite a bit, especially when it came to naming the website and the tagline. And actually, someone very special helped me with the tagline, Gia Duke. I get great feedback on that tagline. Came from Gia, everybody. Gia is the genius behind my tagline, the revolution. But yeah, for the name of Tilt and for a lot of the language, including the language of differently wired, which is something, I've gotten a couple emails like, why are you using that language instead of disorder or deficit? These things are a deficit. Or
the labels kids get in school, like, why aren't you calling it, whatever it is? I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's a very sensitive issue for people. And I really wanted to create Tilt. It's not like we're ignoring that there are real challenges associated with these different ways of moving through the world. But really, we want Tilt to feel inspiring and, again, kind of optimistic and forward thinking and not something that is a reminder of, this is hard and there's something wrong here, but rather this is a different way of being, and how can we embrace that, accept it, and support it. And, I had a ton of different names I was playing with, and I'd run them by Asher, and no, that could be, this has a negative connotation. Oh, this could be interpreted like he just slashed so many of my ideas, which I'm so grateful for, because he really helped me he had such a strong gut reaction to things. And one thing I did not want to do is create something that made Asher feel as if there was something wrong with him. And so it was just the best kind of partner in naming this project. And we talk about it a lot. We talk about language and the connotations that language has. And so it's really important to us that the language of Tilt captures our philosophy of, again, hopefulness, positivity, embracing, accepting, and supporting.
Yeah, I think you did an amazing job. And I know how much time and energy you put into, again, like you said, checking with people, and especially Asher. Like, isn't that the most important person? Is let's talk to the kids.
Yep.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with everybody. I know you've been getting emails about that, and people have different responses. So I think that's so great to hear your perspective and philosophy and how much time and energy you did put into making the decisions that you made.
Yeah. Thank you.
So before we wrap up, I want to hear, I know you've been getting lots of feedback from people. We just mentioned that a little bit, but what has your response been like? Give us some scoop since the launch. What's happening?
It has been so awesome. And it's
really been just a couple weeks, right?
Yeah. At the time that we're recording this, it's been maybe 2.5 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's been fantastic. I'm getting emails from, people other than my aunt and my sister, No, I'm getting emails from strangers saying, simply, thank you. Thank you for creating this. I'm in. And that to me just fills me with so much joy. When I get that, I'm like, I really want people to feel connected. I want people to feel like they found their home. And, again, this isn't going to speak to everybody, and that's totally fine. But if it can speak to some people and kind of help them reframe their experience, then that's what I want to do. And the feedback has been so just generous and kind, and people are, what can I do to support you? And people are wanting to introduce me to people and make connections with other like-minded people doing work in this space. And so it has been super exciting. It's been fun. I love checking my email every morning now.
It's the little reward. Well, and what you've created too is not like, yay, Debbie. I mean, yes, you're the heart behind the project, but you really want to build a community for other people. And so I imagine getting all this feedback saying, this is so helpful, or I'm going to forward this to my friend, or I listened to your podcast with my son and he loves Asher, and that's got to be the big reward.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. This isn't about me. And that's something I wanted to make clear from the very beginning. It's not about me. It's not about Asher. It's about everyone kind of owning their own experience and finding their own way in a way that feels good and that supports their whole family and also can inspire other people. It's a community ultimately that we want to create.
Yeah, it's a great start. So I'm not surprised that you have the feedback that you do with the heart that you have behind the project. And it's only going to go increase because you're just getting the word out 2.5 weeks in.
Yeah, cool. It's so funny to think of it that way.
Think about it too.
Yeah. Woo.
So now here's the question I made you pause on, but can you share with us a little bit about your bigger vision for Tilt? Like, what do you see it developing into? What are some of your big plans? Is there anything you can share with us?
I want to do everything. So I probably shouldn't say that or go into too much detail, but let's just say, I would love for Tilt to be a destination where any parent who is getting feedback from school or from a teacher or other people in their lives that starting to get the feedback like, or maybe they just intuitively know there's something going on here, that Tilt can kind of be the first responder. Tilt will be that place that people can instantly go to and feel like, okay, I have a partner here. I'm not alone in this. There are other people in my space. Yeah. And, there's no one way to move through this. That's just to be clear, no matter what diagnosis your child has, or if they have no diagnosis, but if they're differently wired, there's no one way to move through this. But I want to, I hope that we can provide some possible frameworks for how to kind of navigate all the things that are important to consider depending on what you're seeing going on with your child. So I really want it to be, again, like that first responder, a place to instantly feel at home, connected, get resources, opportunities for learning. I see us offering, online courses with experts down the road, and just kind of, and ultimately I'd love to have, some sort of a interactive community where people can support each other and share experiences in a really positive, uplifting, mentoring way. So kind of some of the things I have in mind. But for now, I'm going to focus on creating great podcasts and just kind of continuing to connect with our tribe.
Yeah, and getting the word out.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
It's always fun to hear the vision, though.
Yeah, it's exciting, but I need to slow down and just focus on what I'm doing. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, got a lot going on. Well, it's amazing. This is so exciting, Debbie. As you know, I'm one of your biggest fans, and how much I believe in people creating something from the heart to help others. It's exactly what you're doing. And I just know, since you shared this with me way back when, I just really believe Tilt's going to impact so many people and their families and build an incredible community. It's already doing that. And even though we talk all the time, it's been so much fun to interview you. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for interviewing me. This has been fun, totally fun for me.
Of course. And then I'm reminded again of how amazing you are and how big your heart is and what an awesome mama you are and what an awesome kiddo you have. And we didn't even mention your husband, what an awesome husband you have. And we got to throw Darren in the mix here.
Yeah, Darren's getting the shaft. Sorry, Darren.
So, but it's true. It's the whole family, right? It's not just, we've heard your perspective, but there's also the dad's side as well.
Absolutely. We'll get him on the podcast one of these days. I've been getting requests for the father perspective. So I'm sure that is coming down the road.
Perfect. Thanks again. Yeah, I'm excited just to see what comes and to keep listening and following your journey.
Thank you. And thank you so much for interviewing me. I could not have been in more capable hands. I really appreciate it.
You're so welcome.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Tilt Parenting Podcast. If you want to know more about my fabulous interviewer, Gia Duke, my work as a writer and writing coach, or any of the other resources mentioned in today's show, check out the show notes for this episode, which you'll find at tiltparenting.com/session7. For more information on all of the podcast episodes, visit tiltparenting.com/podcast. We've been so excited by the great reviews and feedback we're getting on iTunes for the podcast. Thank you. And if you haven't done so already, please consider subscribing and leaving us an honest review on iTunes. We've been featured in iTunes' new and noteworthy section for kids and family for several weeks now, and we want to keep it that way so more parents can find us. For more information on Tilt, the revolution for parents raising differently wired kids, and to sign up to be part of the community, visit www.tiltparenting.com.